I never thought I would be the person to walk away from someone I loved so deeply. But there comes a moment when you realize that loving someone should not mean losing yourself in the process. For months, maybe even years, I had been the one reaching out, the one making plans, the one who would drop everything just to hear their voice or see their face. I was the one sending good morning messages that went unanswered until late afternoon, the one making excuses for why they were always too busy, too tired, or too distracted to give me even a fraction of the attention I gave them. Every conversation felt like I was pulling teeth. Every plan felt like I was begging for scraps of their time. I told myself that they cared, that they were just going through something, that if I just held on a little longer, things would get better. But deep down, I knew the truth that I was too afraid to face. I was not a priority in their life. I was an option, a convenience they could turn to whenever they needed something but could easily ignore when someone or something more interesting came along. The realization did not hit me all at once, but rather crept in slowly, like a shadow that grew longer with each passing day until it consumed every bit of light I had left inside me. I remember the exact moment I decided I was done, not in anger or spite, but with a quiet, exhausted certainty that I deserve better than this one-sided love. I stopped chasing, stopped reaching out, stopped being the only one who cared enough to try, and when I did, something incredible happened. Absolutely nothing. They did not notice, they did not care, and that told me everything I needed to know. So I left, not with a dramatic goodbye or a long explanation, but simply by choosing myself for once. A never-loathed decision to walk away was not easy, despite how clear it had become that I needed to do it. There were so many nights I lay awake questioning myself, wondering if I was being too harsh too. Impatient. Too demanding of someone who might genuinely be struggling. I replayed every conversation in my mind, analyzing every word, every pause, every excuse they had given me for their absence. Was I overreacting? Was I expecting too much? These questions tormented me because I genuinely wanted to believe that the person I loved was worth the pain I was feeling. But then I would remember the pattern that had emerged over time, the consistent way they would disappear when I needed them most, only to reappear when they wanted attention or validation. I thought about all the times I had canceled plans with friends and family just to be available for them, only to have them cancel on me at the last minute without a second thought. I remembered the birthdays they forgot, the important moments they missed, the promises they broke without ever acknowledging the hurt they caused. Each memory was like adding another weight to a scale that had been tipping for far too long, and eventually it became impossible to ignore which side was heavier. I realized that I had been so focused on loving them that I had forgotten to love myself, so busy trying to make them happy that I had neglected my own happiness entirely. The person I had become in this relationship was someone I barely recognized anymore, someone who constantly apologized for having needs, who tiptoed around their moods, who accepted crumbs of affection and pretended they were a feast. This was not who I was meant to be, and staying in this situation meant continuing to betray myself every single day. When I finally made the decision to stop chasing them, I did not announce it or make a grand gesture out of it. I simply stopped doing what I had always done, stopped being the one to initiate contact, stopped planning our next meeting, stopped asking how their day was going or if they wanted to talk. At first it felt strange and uncomfortable, like I was missing a limb or forgetting to complete an essential daily task. My fingers would hover over my phone screen, muscle memory urging me to send that good morning text or share something funny I had seen. But each time I would take a deep breath and put the phone down, reminding myself why I was doing this and what I hoped to discover. Part of me, the hopeful part that still clung to the fantasy of who they could be, rather than who they actually were, expected them to notice my absence and reach out. I imagined them realizing how much I had been doing to keep us connected, feeling guilty for taking me for granted, and finally stepping up to meet me halfway. Days passed, then a week, then 2 weeks, and my phone remained silent. There were no messages asking if I was okay, no calls wondering why I had gone quiet, no acknowledgement whatsoever that anything had changed between us. The silence was deafening and heartbreaking, but it was also clarifying in a way that nothing else could have been. It confirmed what I had suspected, but been too afraid to fully accept, that my presence in their life was so insignificant that my absence went completely unnoticed. This realization, as painful as it was, became the foundation of my strength to move forward, because it proved that I was not walking away from someone who loved me. I was walking away from someone who had never truly valued me in the first place. The weeks following my decision were a complicated mixture of grief, relief, anger, and unexpected freedom. I grieved for the relationship I had wanted, for the person I had hoped they would become, for all the time and energy I had invested in something that was never going to give me what I needed. There were moments when the sadness felt overwhelming, when I would see something that reminded me of them, or when I would instinctively reach for my phone to share a thought before remembering that we were no longer in contact. But alongside the grief was a growing sense of relief, a lightness I had not felt in longer than I could. Remember, without the constant anxiety of wondering when they would respond or whether they were thinking about me, without the exhausting work of trying to maintain a connection with someone who was not equally invested, I found myself with so much more mental and emotional energy. I started redirecting that energy toward things and people who actually appreciated it, reconnecting with friends I had neglected, pursuing hobbies I had abandoned, and most importantly, rebuilding the relationship with myself that I had allowed to deteriorate. The anger came in waves, usually when I would reflect on specific instances of their thoughtlessness or remember how many times I had compromised my own needs to accommodate theirs. I was angry at them for taking advantage of my patience and generosity, but I was also angry at myself for allowing it to continue for so long. However, I learned to channel that anger into motivation rather than letting it consume me, using it as fuel to reinforce my boundaries and remind myself why going back was not an option, no matter how lonely or nostalgic I might feel. As time went on, something remarkable happened that I had not anticipated. I started to rediscover who I was outside of that relationship, and I realized I genuinely liked that person. For so long, I had defined myself in relation to them, measuring my worth by how much they wanted me, how happy I could make them, how well I could meet their needs while ignoring my own. Without that constant reference point, I was forced to ask myself questions I had been avoiding for years. What did I actually enjoy doing? What were my goals and dreams that had nothing to do with anyone else? What kind of person did I want to be? And what kind of life did I want to build? The answers came slowly at first, hesitant and uncertain after being suppressed for so long, but they came. I discovered that I loved spending quiet mornings with a book and coffee, that I felt most alive when I was creating something with my own hands, that I valued deep, meaningful conversations with people who actually listened and engaged. I set new goals for myself, both big and small, and for the first time in years I had the mental space and emotional bandwidth to actually pursue them. I started saying yes to opportunities I would have previously turned down because they conflicted with my availability for someone who was rarely available for me. I started saying no to things that did not serve me, practicing boundaries in a way I never had before. The most surprising discovery was how much I enjoyed my own company, something I had been afraid of when I first stopped chasing them. I had worried that the silence and solitude would be unbearable, that I would feel incomplete without someone to focus on, but instead, I found peace, clarity, and a growing sense of self-assurance that had been missing for far too long. Inevitably, after several months of silence, they reached out. The message came late at night, casual and breezy, as if no time had passed at all, as if they had not completely ignored my existence for months. They asked how I had been, said they had been thinking about me, suggested we should catch up soon. My initial reaction was a complicated knot of emotions. A small, stubborn part of me that still remembered what I had felt for them wanted to respond immediately, wanted to believe that they had finally realized what they had lost and were ready to do better. But the stronger, wiser part of me that had grown during our time apart knew better. I looked at that message and saw it for what it really was. Not a genuine reconnection or an apology for their previous behavior, but another instance of them reaching out when it was convenient for them, expecting me to be available as I always had been before. There was no acknowledgement of the months of silence, no recognition that they had hurt me, no indication that anything had changed on their end. They simply assumed I would pick up right where we left off, as if my feelings and my time were of no consequence. For a moment, I considered responding just to tell them exactly how I felt, to explain all the ways they had failed me and how much damage they had caused. But then I realized that doing so would defeat the entire purpose of walking away. It would give them access to me again, would open a door I had worked so hard to close. More importantly, they did not deserve an explanation because they had never asked for one when it mattered. So I did something I never thought I would have the strength to do. I did not respond at all. I read the message, processed my feelings about it, and then I let it go, choosing to protect my peace rather than resurrect a dynamic that had only ever caused me pain.